Hi, my name is Bob, and today we're going to prep the materials to build a pocket door frame. All right, to begin with, we need to move the chop saw out of the way. So we pull our pins, put them in a place where I can always find them when I'm done, and just slide this back. Now that'll be out of the way for ripping. Now we'll go over here and we'll get the lights turned on, the safety lights, so as people will know that we're ripping material. We turn on both lights. The theory is that people will now know that it's not safe to come behind the saw. Now we set the blade up for width and for height. To start with, I'm going to be ripping down material to build a 2x4 pocket door frame. And we use a jig to judge the width of the drop and locking down the fence. And then we also drop the feeder down to the proper height to be able to pull the materials through. We have our anti-kickback device in place, so as hopefully nothing gets kicked back at us as we go through. Now as we go along, every time I come out from behind the saw, I will shut the saw off. Safety reasons. Let's start ripping. We turn on the feeder, turn on the saw, grab my pine, and as I'm going through, I'm looking around to see what I've got for materials. I want to try to save one out in particular for a 2x6 wall, so I can get a face out of the drop. Now we go ahead and push the pine through, keeping an eye on what's going on with the wood and the blade, so as we don't end up running into any issues. And if we do run into any issues, we're right there ready to handle it as they come up. Always use a push stick for the last bit of the push, keeping the hands out of the way of the blade. Shut the saw off. I come around over here to grab my material off the bench to move it out of the way for the next one. Being aware of everybody that's going on around you. I'd put my drop here. These boards will be my slats. These boards will end up being used for heads, faces, or heads and backs. The face drops will go in here. So let's rip another one. Now typically what I do is for each pocket door frame, I count out 3 of these 1x6s to be able to complete one pocket door frame. And out of 3, we end up with enough material. Usually even a little bit extra. In the process, I'm also trying to pay attention to the different knots that I have on my board and how it might affect the way the board gets cut. Some knots are harder and more difficult to run through the blade. Also looking for splits and cracks in the board, so to make the best usage of the material I have. Now, because there is so many people working around this whole area, we keep our eyes out for people like what we just had with Matt that just was over here putting materials on his L frame. If I can, I try to wait till he is clear he was clear enough to begin with, but if I can give him a little extra room, it's all the better. Now sometimes I end up with a board that I'd rather have the bad end down on the end that ends up being a drop, so I'll flip it around like that. And that way when I get ready to cut off, like this one has not quite so nice an edge right here, this ends up getting thrown away. And we don't end up using it, don't have to worry about it ending up being in the frame. Makes for a cleaner, better product. Okay, we have somebody behind us that's wanting to use the cutout machine, so we'll allow him an opportunity to do what he needs to do. Make sure that he's clear before we rip another board. Now, as he is using the cutout machine, we're okay to keep going, but when he's going back and forth setting up the cutout machine, we'll wait on him. And that's part of the reason for the lights, is to allow him the opportunity to understand that we are doing some ripping of material here. Okay, I think we can go ahead and rip another board right now while he's where he's at. We all try to work together so no one person's job is more important than the other. Each job is important. Okay, I've got one more short piece of drop from what somebody had used for a skid. This is a leftover. It's long enough I can utilize it for my slats. So I'm going to go ahead and rip it down for that. And then we'll rip down a board to be able to use for a 2x6 wall. So now we'll set the saw up to be able to build us a 2x6. We end up for a 2x6 wall, the backs and the heads are 4 inches wide. So we use the tape measure as a guide here. Then we grab our jig and slide it in. Okay, right now from where I had this set, we're just a little bit on the wide side, not very much. So we kind of touch it over a little bit. That's better. Want a little bit of friction there. Don't want it to be too tight, don't want it to be too loose. And we'll keep an eye on where Freddie's at with his stuff. We may let him go ahead and pull that door out of there before we start this one. He says we're good to go. Okay, that's the extent of the materials that we need to rip down for what I need to build today. I always clean my machine off when I get done. Make it nicer for the next guy or the next time. And being we're done ripping with this saw, we shut our lights off. Now, what we have here, this piece will be used for my 2x6 wall. It should be approximately 4 inches wide, which it is. And then this piece I'll cut down for my faces, to use for a face. Try to not waste any more material than we need to. It is one of the things I've been criticized for, is saving too much material. Hey, if that's the worst thing that happens, I'll take that. And this should be roughly 1 1/4 inches. It's 1 3/8 inches, so well, it'll be all right for the face. It'll be fine. So we'll get this board out of the way. And I'm going to leave that face board there, and I'm going to cut it down to length. We'll pull this saw back out and repin it into place. Locks it in. And then I've got marks on the end of the bench here that I use as a guide to roughly set the material to the proper length. And then I pull out my tape measure. My marks are guides, they are not the rules. Throw our scraps in the wood bin. Now the frames I'm building today are all 6'8" in height as opposed to an 8'0". This way, you know, we're told our height for our frames and our width and our depth on our paperwork. Gives me an idea as to what I'm working with. So now I'll take this piece of 1x4 that I ripped down a little bit ago, and we'll cut the back out of it, and then out of that drop we'll also cut a face or a top for the head. For a 6'8" frame in height, our measurement is 83 3/4, which is what we have now. And I'll set this one out of the way and off to the side. Now I'll take this piece and I'll cut it down for my 2/8 2x6. The length on the 2/8 is 64.5 inches for the heads. That will be one of the heads. That's the material for a 2x6 wall 2/8 head. And again, I'll set this off to the side for the moment. Now we have a piece of scrap. I'm going to utilize some of this for this frame and for other frames as well. We've got to have at least 1 foot and 1 shipping block. This one will serve for a foot. This is part of a shipping block. I'll utilize this one as well. What's left for more shipping block. For future 2x6 frames. Now I have a place where I store my materials for later use, right down here. Now, at this point right now, I've already have at least 1 shipping block built up, ready to utilize. So I won't have to actually worry about assembling them, but they're very simple. You take a drop off of the 1x4, slap it onto a scrap piece of the 1x3, and these get fastened to the face of the frames when we're done with the information written on them. So as everybody knows the size, the builder, and the ticket number. Makes it easier to keep track of what's going on. Okay, now we'll set up to start cutting down material. At this point right now, this is the paperwork I'm working off of. Today, we're building a 2.4, a 2.8, actually 2 2/8s, and 1 2/8 2x6 frame. So we've got part of the material already cut for the 2x6 frame. Now we'll start cutting up slats. So I need a total of 3 slats for a 2.8, total of 3 sets of slats. I already have 1 set of slats in place for my 2.8. So I've got to cut at least 2 more sets, and then I've got to cut at least 1 set for the 2.4 frame. So I'll set this paperwork out of the way, get my jig set up. We have a jig here that we use to help in judging the length. Helps it to go a little quicker in the process. I've already got a board that's been cut for the proper length for a 2.8. The 2.8 is 31. The 2.8 slats are 31 7/8 in length. So that's our length. So what I do is I set that up here, bring down my saw, lock it in place, slide the jig up into place, tighten down the wing nut, and because this has a tendency to sometimes slide around, I'll secure it down a little better with those screws. Now we're ready to start chopping down material. And typically I will cut up about 6 boards at a time. It's a little more efficient that way. We use 12 slats per frame. So I'm going to swing this over like this. Bring these up into place. Slide that against my material, my stop. Make sure everything's up tight against it. And now we begin to cut up material. And we keep our hands fairly clear of the blade as much as possible. Now I'm going to drop 2 of these out of here because I've already got partial there and I only need 4 more to finish out what I have need of. And there's my 2/8. Now what I have here on my bench, I have set up so I keep track of what's what, keep things in order. I have my 3 O's, my 2/8, 2 6, 2 4s, and my 2 O's. That way when I need to build a frame, I look and see what I have for material cut up already, or as I'm building a frame, I don't need to guess at which stack is which. It's already assembled and ready to go. Now we'll set up to cut the rest of this material up to a 2/4. And again, I have marks on my bench as guides. They are not the rules, they are guides. So I get out my tape measure. For a 2/4, the length of the slat is 27 7/8 inches. So I just cut me a stack down to that length. I'll take my stop and adjust it back out, back to where that needs to go. And these are scraps. Sometimes I'll cut these down to utilize for my shipping blocks when I'm short on them. Then I start chopping these up to make my shipping blocks. Right now I've got more than enough, so I don't need to worry about it. So they get thrown away. And I ripped down more than enough material, which again, that's quite all right. I'd rather end up a little bit too much than not enough. Right now, as it sits, I have enough material ripped down to be able to start building pocket door frames. I'm going to go ahead and finish ripping down the material that I have. And as you're chopping material down with this saw, you want to make sure the blade is up to speed before you bring it down into the material, or you will get a violent kickback. And then we'll take the jig out of the way and put it home. Put the drill over here on the bench. I'll use it a little bit later. Now I need to cut some backs for these frames. Today I have a total of 4 frames that I've got to build. 3 of them are 2x4, one's a 2x6. We have a 2x6 back cut. I need to cut 3 more backs. So I'll go ahead and take 2 of my 1x2 drops, bring them over to the saw. That'll give me 4 backs. So we'll slip this out of the way, bring this stack back down here. And as long as things didn't move around much, they should be lined up pretty good on the one end. And again, we'll measure it out. And now we have the materials together to build a pocket door frame. So let's get building.